Hi, I'm Jim Hewling, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you to this episode of Execution Insights, the podcast. You know, there are moments in the year when it just feels like time is different. I don't really know how to describe it. You know, it's not faster, it's not slower, but it's thinner. It's as if the noise recedes just enough for something deeper to finally speak up. And that's what this moment feels like to me right here as we begin the new year. It feels like, you know, that space between Christmas and the new year that has always carried a special quality. After all the decorations have come down, but the calendar hasn't fully filled back up, you know, and for a little small window, we're left alone with ourselves, especially as leaders. And I'm not talking about our goals or our expectations. I'm just talking about ourselves. And in that space, I think a different kind of question tends to rise to the surface. And it's not about what should I do next? It's about who am I becoming? Now, that question has been at the center of this series of reflections all throughout the Christmas season. And today I want to bring it to a close in a way that I hope feels honest and hopeful and fully human. Not by rushing past what we've learned, no, not at all, but by letting it settle. So in December, we began with Jacob Marley, one of my favorite characters. And, you know, Marley is not the villain in the story of A Christmas Carol, but he might be its most important character. Now, think about him for just a moment. Jacob Marley isn't cruel. He isn't immoral by the standards of his time, and he certainly isn't unambitious or lazy. In fact, quite the opposite. He's respected, he's productive, he's accomplished. And that's what makes his message so unsettling. Because, as you know, if you've seen it many times, when Marley appears that night, bound in chains that he forged himself, he never says he failed. He says something far more disturbing. He says, mankind was my business. In other words, he's saying, I succeeded, but I missed the point. And I think that point is that it's possible to build a remarkable career. It's possible to lead teams and create results and earn recognition and still drift away from what matters most. And by the way, it's not because we choose badly. It's because we choose too narrowly. You see, Marley's tragedy wasn't some great sin. It was just forgetfulness. And that's where his warning still speaks today, and I think especially to leaders, because in leadership, we have a way of narrowing our field of vision. You know, urgency crowds out presence, responsibility crowds out relationships, and for sure, results can crowd out humanity. Now, not suddenly, quietly, link by link. And if the story ended there, gosh, well, it would be a grim story indeed. But thank goodness, Charles Dickens doesn't leave us with just Marley. He also gives us Scrooge. And that's where this reflection turns from awakening to hope. You see, Scrooge's story is often told as a change in behavior. But if you look deeply, that's not really what happens. Scrooge wakes up with a different way of seeing the world. He doesn't optimize his schedule. He doesn't set an alarm clock. He doesn't adopt a new habit. He just wakes up with a changed heart because something in him softened, something open, something long buried was brought back to life. And in that moment, he remembers who he was before all those walls went up. And in many ways, he remembers the cost of the life he's chosen. And because his being changes, well, his behavior follows naturally. Instead of taking, he starts to give. Instead of pushing people away, he starts to reconnect. He restores many of the things he had broken, and he becomes present where he once withdrew in isolation. You see, Dickens gives us this quiet, powerful affirmation at the end of the story. I know you remember it. He says, Scrooge became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. And my friends, that line matters because it tells us this wasn't a momentary surge of emotion. No, it was an altered life. And that's where I want to linger just a moment in this year-ending reflection. You see, most New Year's reflections focus on doing. What will I accomplish? What will I build this year? What will I achieve? And those questions are great and they matter. But I think they're incredibly incomplete because beneath every doing goal should be a being reality. You see, who we are determines how we do what we do. And even greater, how people experience us determines whether our success blesses or burdens the people around us. Scrooge didn't just change what he did, he changed who he was. And that change rippled outward into everything else which followed. Which brings us really to the threshold we're standing on right now. This is a new year, a long-awaited, with much excitement, new year. And very soon, all of our calendars will be full. All of the expectations we live with, especially as leaders, will return, and the pace will pick up again and likely be faster than it was last year. But before that happens, I want to offer you a gentle invitation. Not a demand, not a resolution, a sincere invitation to pause just long enough to ask a different kind of New Year's question. Not what do I want to achieve this year, but who do I want to become this year? Who do I want to be in my relationships? Who do I want to be as a leader? Who do I want to be when things are hard or unclear or disappointing? Even what kind of presence do I want to bring every time I walk into a room? You see, the questions we don't ask are about what it would mean to live an altered life. Now, not in big dramatic gestures, but in the small, everyday, daily choices. Because you see, over time, our roles will fade, our titles will change, our metrics will all reset. But who we become and how people experience us stands forever. And so as this season comes to a close, I want to give you this final thought. Marley shows us what happens when awareness comes too late. But Scrooge shows us what's possible when awareness comes just in time. And the difference between them is not about intelligence or courage or work ethic. It's about the ability to see ourselves honestly and having the courage to soften instead of harden. So as we step into the year ahead, here's my hope for you and for me and for everyone listening to this message. It's not that you can simply do more. It's that you and I will choose to become more of who we were always meant to be. More human, more compassionate, more alive. And then one day, in whatever circle you lead, it might be said of you or of me, quietly and sincerely, that you and I were as good a friend and as good a leader and as good a human being as anyone had ever known. And my friends, that's a life worth living. And it is most certainly a leadership worth following. This is Jim Hewling, and this is Execution Insights, the podcast. I wish you a very happy new year and a great and beautiful chapter as we begin it as the new year comes. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next year.